F1.8 Full Frame Zoom lens. What? This is the new Sigma 28-45 F1.8 lens, and today I'm going to be reviewing this lens from the perspective of a wedding filmmaker, because aside from its weight, I think this lens is an excellent choice if you film weddings or corporate or commercial videos or anything where you need a lens that excels in low light performance while also giving you an internal zoom, meaning that it's perfect for gimbal work because the weight is not going to shift as much. Spoiler for how I feel about this lens out of the way. Now, if you are a wedding filmmaker and you want some help booking your next wedding, I've put together a free workshop that's going to show you the exact steps to take to book a wedding. Regardless of whether you are brand new to filming weddings or you've been filming them for a while, you're going to find this workshop incredibly helpful to you. It's completely free, and you can watch it at the link down in the video description. Also, for the sake of ethics, I want you to know this video is not paid or sponsored by Sigma. They did loan me this lens so I could make this review, and I will sadly be returning it to them very soon. But considering the price, I might have to pick one of these up because I'm already thinking of several situations where I'm like, dang, that'd be a nice lens to have for that. Now, let's start off this lens review with some drama. Gotta love drama, right? Well, in the case of the 28-35, as I often do whenever I get a new piece of gear, I made an Instagram reel showing it off, and at hundreds of thousands of plays at the time of making this video, this reel actually managed to generate some controversy, with me seeing 2 complaints about this lens consistently show up. Now, before I share with you these complaints, let me set the context for my general take about this lens. My take is that this Sigma 28-45 builds upon the legendary success of Sigma's earlier 18-35 f1.8 APS-C lens, which filmmakers absolutely loved. And so, of course, Sigma realized this and they said, hey, what if we make a full-frame version of that lens? And that's what they did with this new 28-45. So imagine my surprise whenever I posted an Instagram reel about this lens and I started seeing multiple comments where people complaining about the width of this lens, repeatedly saying that 28 millimeters is not wide enough and it really needs to be 24 millimeters if Sigma wants people to buy this lens. To that, I have 2 responses. First, hey, if you are not happy with the width of 28 millimeters because you've used lenses that were that wide before and you always found yourself wanting a bit more width, I totally get that. Heck, I'm filming this video on a 24 millimeter right now, not a 28 millimeter, but I think that has to do more with the fact that 24 millimeters are a lot more common than 28 millimeter lenses. Anyways, here's my second response, and here's where I'm going to give you more pushback for the complaint about this lens not being wide enough. The issue is that the older Sigma 18-35 that this lens is based on is a lens that was specifically made for APS-C crop sensor cameras, meaning that even though it said it was an 18-35 millimeter, on a full frame camera it wasn't actually that wide, and you actually need to do a bit of math to figure out the actual width of the lens. Specifically, with the EF mount version of that lens, Canon's APS-C cameras had a 1.6 times crop, so multiply the 18 millimeters of that earlier lens with 1.6, and what you thought was an 18 millimeter is actually a 28 millimeter on a full frame camera. Yes, both of these lenses have the exact same width on the wide end, which means that if you're complaining about this new Sigma 28-45 not being wide enough, you're basically complaining that the older Sigma 18-35 wasn't wide enough either. And considering how many glowing reviews I saw for that lens over the years from filmmakers that absolutely loved using it and never complained about the width, really shows that I think you need to use this lens before you write it off. And use it I have. But I said earlier whenever I posted that Instagram reel about this lens, I received 2 comments complaining about it. So let's talk about the second. The second complaint is that this 28-45 millimeter is too small of a zoom range. It's only a 17 millimeter zoom after all. But going back to the previous Sigma lens now, how many millimeters was that 18-35 again? Oh yeah, 17 millimeters. Like I said, these lenses are essentially the same, with this 28-45 just being a larger version. Of course, that 1.6x crop on the older lens lets you do a bit of math magic, so it actually isn't only a 17 millimeter difference because 35s times 1.6 is actually 56 millimeters, so the smaller, older lens does have more zoom on the long end. But that said, I think that this lens is as close as Sigma could make it to their older 18-35 and still make it full frame and give it this level of low light performance. And those are the 2 complaints that I've received about this lens. But how is the lens really? Once you get this lens in your hands, how does it actually feel to film with? And I gotta say, I really like it. First off, it definitely does have some weight. At 950 grams, this lens is definitely not light and about 95 grams less than Sony's new 70-200 f2.8 lens. So if you want a comparison, hold one of those if you have one laying around to get a rough gauge on the weight of this one. Also, while we are comparing weights, this lens is also a bit heavier than the original Sigma 18-35, but not by much because that lens came in at 810 grams, so I don't think that adding another 140 grams to make this lens full frame is necessarily bad. The main thing that you're going to need to keep in mind is that if you're planning on using this to film a wedding all day, it might be time to bust out a new arm workout, because I found myself getting tired after about 20 minutes of using this lens on a gimbal, so you're definitely going to want to have some other lenses to supplement this one to give your arms a break. Or maybe a monopod. By a monopod? I don't know. That said, this lens does feel well balanced for its weight, and that can make a huge difference, because if the lens is too heavy in the front or back, you can really tell. So it's great to see that Sigma engineers have worked on this lens so it doesn't feel too heavy in the front or rear. Speaking of that weight shift, that leads us easily into talking about one of my favorite features of this lens, the internal zoom. Yes, not only is this lens an f1.8 throughout the zoom range, it also does this all while being an internal zoom, meaning that the barrel does not extend whenever you zoom the lens in and out. It stays the same length, which means that Sigma may have sacrificed the ability to make this lens a bit shorter, but in the process, they made this lens significantly more compelling for filmmakers because internal zoom lenses shift their weight significantly less when you zoom them in and out, which makes them far more appealing if you want to put this lens on a gimbal. And of course, I tested that. Throwing this new 28-45 on my gimbal and balancing it at the widest 28mm, I found that while this lens does, of course, shift its weight when zooming in and out, like all lenses do, the internal zoom has significantly lessened how much the weight shift is. And I feel confident saying that if you're using a modern gimbal with decently strong motors, you could balance this lens at 28mm and still zoom it to 45 without compromising your stability. But if you want a very accurate balance with minimal weight shift that'll work on essentially any gimbal, I tested on multiple, I would recommend setting your zoom to 36mm, which is the sweet spot right in the middle, and balancing your gimbal there. Then if you have to zoom it in or out, the shift in weight is not going to be as extreme, and in all my testing with multiple gimbals where I balanced them in the middle, they did not act any different whenever the lens was at 28 or 45mm. Now, all of this easy balancing would matter if the lens image quality sucked, but I'm happy to tell you that just like other Sigma lenses, to my eye, this lens looks great too. Colors are contrasty and vibrant, footage looks sharp even at f1.8 throughout the zoom range, and really, are you surprised by any of this? It's been years since I've used a lens that was not at least basically competent. I feel like all lens manufacturers have gotten really good at making sharp lenses at this point. Maybe I just haven't tried some stinkers. I don't know. You can comment and tell me, no, Matt, you gotta try this one, it's horrible. And then I'll be like, why would I try that then? I don't know. Autofocus also worked well with this lens, and I didn't find the lens hunting, and it looked fast and accurate. I have no complaints here, it's very solid. Manual focus was different though. Unfortunately, this lens has a non-linear focus motor, where if you rotate the focus ring quickly, the focus will change a lot, but if you rotate it slowly, the focus will change more gradually. This is kind of a pain if you're trying to replicate the same focus pull every time. So if you're not someone that uses manual focus often, I don't think that it's going to be a deal breaker for you, but you should definitely be aware of it. In a perfect world, I would love if this could be changed in the lens firmware somehow, where you have the option to enable or disable it. Comment if you'd like the ability to do that, and I will pass that feedback along to Sigma. Sadly, because this lens is a third-party lens, I'm sorry to say, but it does not support Sony's focus breathing compensation feature that is available on all of their native Sony-made lenses, and because of that, I found myself actually having to test the focus breathing, which has largely become a non-issue whenever I test any Sony lenses, because you can just turn on the focus breathing compensation and then never worry about it again. Regardless, whenever I tested the focus breathing with this lens, I was pleasantly surprised to see that it was fairly minimal, and if you're filming a wedding, I doubt that you're even going to notice it. And even if you're filming a talking head for an interview, you should still be fine. Also, I just realized I never really touched on the build quality of the 28-45. It feels well built like many of Sigma's newer lenses. You get 2 programmable buttons, which are great to see, an aperture control ring so you can adjust the aperture, a clickless switch so you can make the aperture changes clickless, and an aperture ring lock as well, which you can click and then it will prevent it from rotating. And I have to say, all of these switches are very satisfying. Oh, it's just such a good click sound. I love it. Like there's a little ADHD itch in my brain that's being scratched every time I flip this thing. It's Very nice. Please don't buy this thing just as a fidget spinner because it'd be an expensive fidget spinner. That said, though, speaking of satisfying, we do need to talk price, though, because your wallet will be satisfied if you buy this lens, because at the time of recording this video, it only costs $1,350, which I realize is still quite a chunk of change, but if you consider that so many newer first-party lenses these days are $2,000 or even $3,000, getting an f1.8 lens that is well-built and also happens to be a zoom that is excellent for a gimbal, I'm honestly surprised that this lens doesn't cost more. So if you are a wedding filmmaker and you've been looking for a wider lens that is lower than f2 but also happens to be a zoom, or maybe you're a filmmaker that oftentimes find themselves using a 35mm lens, but you wish you could zoom in and out while still having the low light that you get from a prime lens, or especially if you used to own or still own an older 18-35 f1.8 APS-C lens and you've been longing for a full frame version of that lens, I'm so happy to tell you that it is here now, and I will link to it down in the video description if you want to pick it up. I'll also link down in the description to my wedding videographer gear guide. If you want to see more equipment that I recommend for wedding filmmaking, along with links to save you time, you can check out my gear guide at the link down in the video description. It's completely free. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day. Hey, before you go, I want you to know that I have some openings in my schedule to film weddings in 2025. So if you are getting married and you want me to film it, especially if you want a behind-the-scenes video made of your wedding that will be here on YouTube, send me an email through the contact form at my website, whoismatt.com, and we can talk.